Hello there guys, Francis Gray here, and in today's video we're going to be building up this rare kit of the Cyclops from the hit movie The 7th Voyage of Sinbad. I'll see you after this. Okay guys, so I did go ahead and make a review of this build. There'll be a link of that in the description bar below if you want to know more about this kit. But in a very short version, it was sculpted by a Mr. Mike Maddy, and it comes in 6 parts, all solid cast resin, and it's got a very unique feature with this one, with a glass doll bead eye cast inside the model itself, which it was very nice to see, because obviously it means we don't have to paint an eye, and yeah, it's the first time I've ever seen that done in a kit, so it was quite refreshing in that way. So without further ado, let's crack on with the build. Step 1. The figure. So the first thing I did, like all resin kits, I went in with some nice sharp files, and then I filed down all the seam lines to make it all blend into the main figure, so we don't have any horrid seam lines popping out that will haunt us later on in the build.
A few minutes later.
Okay guys, so now I've got to a difficult part. Now these will need to be grinded off, because as you can see he really doesn't want to stand up, so these will have to be grinded off and then smoothed right down. Okay, so moment of truth. Does he stand straight? Yes, he does.
Yeah, baby, yeah!
So now that the main figure's done, we need to go ahead and do the exact same with the seam lines for the arms.
5 minutes later.
The job looks like a good one. So for the next part, I went in with my Dremel tool and I took my time and cleaned out the underside of his tongue. So this is the Cyclops' bottom jaw, which has to be attached separate. So this took a while to do because there was quite a chunk of resin formed underneath, and yeah, this was probably the part that took the most cleanup of the main figure, but all's well that ends well. Okay, so moment of truth. Does it line up nice and neat, and does it look good? Yep, I think that is a success. So yeah, I think we can go ahead and glue that in place. So for the next part, I'm going to go in with a 2-part epoxy clay, and I'm going to mix both A and B together so it's nice and fully mixed. And then we're going to go ahead and push it into the arm slots and then push the arms in place, and then basically what this does is it mushes the epoxy clay into any parts that isn't connecting or isn't like flush fit, so to speak. All that basically does is when we go to glue the arm later on, it will be a perfect match. So the glue has more surface tension, which means it'll be a better fit and it'll last, it should be a lot stronger and it'll last a lot longer. So yeah, so a very important step, but yeah, it's a bit fiddly to do overall. So yeah, let's get mixing.
The next morning.
Okay, so after a good 24 hours, so the epoxy clay definitely had time to harden. For the next stage, we're going to go ahead and glue the arms in place. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a 2-part resin. So same again, equal measures of part A, part B, mixed thoroughly, and then just placed on the arms and then the holes of where the arms will join to the main body. and then just hold in place with a good strong elastic band, and again just leave a couple of hours to dry, and then we should have a full figure of a Cyclops. So now that that is nicely glued in place, for the next stage we need to go and sort out these seam lines because they are quite visible. So in order to do that, we're going to go back in with the Aves epoxy modelling clay, and we're going to mix again 2 parts together nice and thorough, and then we're going to use a sculpting tool to get the clay in amongst the seam lines, blend it all out, and then so it's nice and smooth, and then we'll leave it a couple of hours to fully harden.
6.5 hours later.
Okay, so now that the arms turned out really nice, I'm going to go back in with a little tiny bit more Aves epoxy, and I'm going to go ahead and sculpt over the seam line connecting the jaw to the rest of the mouth. Took me a while to do this, but I ended up doing more or less the full jaw, and then going ahead and sculpting in the missing details to make it all blend as one. So I'm happy with the finished result. Okay, so now that the main figure is built, we need to go ahead and start thinking about grey priming this beast. So before we do that, I want to protect the glass eye because I don't want to spray paint over it and then I've got the tedious job of painting more eyes. No point giving yourself extra work. So yeah, so I need to protect that eye, so I'm going to use regular blue tack, and I'm just going to push it in amongst all the little areas, make sure there's no areas where paint can get past or it could leak onto the glass eye. So this is a very important stage, but it's going to work out a lot better in the long run. So now that that's protected, let's go to the spray booth.
And here we go.
So the reason I've gone in with a matte black for a base coat is basically the client asked me if I could paint these up in metallic colours to go along with some of the previous builds that I've built for him in the past. So in order to bring out that nice like copper effect, you should always start with a darker base coat. Okay, so now that we've got a nice black base coat, for the next stage I'm going to go in with some Brassy Brass from Game Colour, best name ever, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give a generous dry brush all around the figure, and that's going to be a nice base for us to build up upon later on. Okay guys, so for the next part I'm going to go in with some metallic brown, and I'm going to give a dry brush to the fair parts. And now I'm going to go in with a lighter shade just to add a dry brush highlight to some of the fur.
You get the idea.
Okay guys, so for the next part I'm going to go in with a metallic acrylic red, and I'm going to do the inside of the mouth area. And for the next part I'm going to go in with some gunmetal grey, and I'm going to do a dry brush highlight on the hooves.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that all more or less the base colours have been added, for the next stage I'm going to go in with a watered down black acrylic wash, and I'm going to paste it all over again to all the nooks and crannies, and then I'm going to carefully take off the excess with some kitchen towel, and then that'll go a long way to get into all the little dark recesses of all the nooks and crannies. It'll basically just give the model a sense of depth. And once that has been left to fully dry, I then went in with some more brassy brass and a thick stipple makeup brush, and then I went over the top surface and then brought some of those highlight details back. So this is a very important stage because you don't want it to be too dark, you just want to get dark in the shaded areas. So this goes a long way to bringing those vibrant colours back. So now that all the base colours are done, I need to go in with a toothpick and carefully remove all the blue tack so we can now get back to the glass eye. So now that the blue tack has been removed, there's some surface areas that are showing up the basic original resin colour. So we need to carefully go in with a very fine detail brush and take our time and then go around with some acrylic black and then make that look like it's more of a dark recess of the eye socket rather than, you know, basic just resin. So now that the black's drying around the eyes, I'm going to go in with some metallic pink, and I'm going to start adding a dry brush highlight to the Cyclops' tongue and some of the areas of the inside of his mouth. Now I don't want to give it all the way back because we want to get that aspect of like shadow and darkness, so it's just going to be more on the tongue itself and then some of the gums on the foreground. So for the next part I'm going to go in with some more brassy brass, and I'm going to add some more of the surface details around the eye so it's not just pure black, and blend that out to the rest of the colour, and then I'm going to go ahead and add some edge highlights to some of the more prominent parts like his nose, around his jaw, tops of his ears, where his eyebrow should be, that armoured plating part. You get the idea. So for the next part I'm going to go in with some acrylic white, and I'm going to carefully paint the teeth a very vibrant white, a couple of coats, and then once fully dry we're going to go in with a Pearl Effect nail polish, and I'm going to have the hard task of getting into all the little teeth and giving it a couple of coats of Pearl Effect, and then that keeps it white but it matches the rest of the metallic paint job. Okay guys, so for the next part I'm going to go in with a glorious gold from Game Colour, and I'm going to do a dry brush highlight to the fingernails and the main horn itself. Looking shiny. And for the next part I took this bad boy into the spray booth, got some black from the Game Colour range, and then decided to go into some of the darker recesses and then added a little bit more hint of shading. And once that was left to dry, I then went in again with 2 coats of a nice gloss varnish to seal all the paintwork and make it look a little bit more shinier, hence the metallic effect. And yeah, now that's been done, I'd say the main figure was done. So for the next part, let's crack on with the base. Step 2. The base. Okay guys, so for the next part I took the base out to the garage and I got my orbital sander, and the underneath part of the base is quite sharp around the edges. Now that's just where it was moulded, and you do get that quite a lot with some resin kits. Always tends to be mainly on the bases for some reason. Might be because it's the surface area being bigger, I don't know. But yeah, I can't leave it as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the edges and then work my way to the inside slowly, and then hopefully we can get this nice and flat and we don't have to worry about cutting our fingers open. So now that that's nice and flat, for the next stage I took it out to my spray booth and I'm going to go ahead and give it at least 2 coats of a nice grey prime. And once that had dried, I then went in with a third coat, but this time of a nice matte black. And this is just to go a long way, like we did with the main figure. Just a black base coat will help pop those metallics later on.
Five hours later.
So once that had fully dried, I then brought it back into the house, and I decided to add some of these little felt sticky back protectors on the underside of the base, basically just to help raise it up a couple of millimeters, and then I don't have to worry about scuffs and scrapes accumulating over a long period of time. So these should go a long way to help and protect this piece overall. So now that the underneath is nicely protected, we're going to flip it the other way. We're going to take some more brassy brass from Game Colour, and I'm going to take a wide makeup brush, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to dry brush over the entire base, and then that will be an awesome start to capturing the metallic look and highlighting all the lovely details.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And once that dried, I then decided to do the same, but this time with a metallic brown, and with it having a copper undercoat, it just goes a long way to making it look more metallic rather than just, well, shiny brown. So once all that was coated, I then went in with some clean paper towel and then just gently rubbed over the top just to show some of that rich copper underneath. And to add even more edge highlighting, I then made a weird concoction of a lighter metallic brown. So in the camera it kind of looks kind of matte, but in real life it was more shiny. But this isn't the final stage. We've got other parts that we need to add to this, so this was just a quick once over just to bring out some of that much needed wood grain. And for the next part I went in with some gunmetal grey, which is a very dark silver, and then I just added a base tone coat to the raised edges, which is supposed to be the nail heads.
No way!
And then I went in with a watered down black acrylic wash, like we did with the main figure. So this is just going to get into all the nooks and crannies and make it look a little bit more aged and used. So just make sure that if you're applying it, you don't leave it on too long before you rub off the excess, because it will dry rather fast. So you just do a little bit and then rub off to bring out the highlights, and then just continue on and persevere as best you can, really.
You only knew the power
of the black wash.
And now I'm going to go in with a lighter brown that I mixed up. Same again, I tried to add a little bit of copper to it to make it metallic. And then we're just going to do a dry brush around some of the edges just to just bring back that vibrancy. And the next part I'm going to go in with one of these chrome pens. Now if you're a model builder, I strongly recommend you buy yourself a few of these, because they're a game changer and a lifesaver at the same time. So these are absolutely brilliant. So just going to go over the nail heads and then just add a nice bit of chrome, and that'll make these really pop out. And then last but not least, I then put this into my spray booth table, and then I give it 2 generous coats of a nice gloss varnish. And now I believe it is done. So now all we need to paint up is the nameplate. Step 3. The nameplate. Okay guys, so here we have the nameplate, the 7th Voyage of Sinbad. And even though it was casted really nice and crisp, there is a few little bits of like resin dust and like resin skin in amongst some of the areas. So I'm just going to go in with some sharp files, and I'm just going to try and get this as smooth as possible. And once done, we can go ahead and put this in the spray booth to give it some much needed grey primer. Okay guys, so for the first thing we're going to do is to take this into the spray booth and give it a couple of coats of a nice grey prime. So once that had dried, for the next stage I went in with some matte black from a spray can, and that goes a long way, just like the figure in the base, to help capturing that those lovely metallic base coats.
A few minutes later.
Okay guys, so now that that's dry, we're going to go in with, yes you guessed it, more brassy brass, and we're going to go ahead with a makeup brush, and we're going to give it a once over coat. Now I'm going to be quite generous with this, because we can add like stainage and all that later on. So this is just to get a couple of at least 1, maybe 2 coats of brassy brass on there, so this is looking nice and metallic for a nice base.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Okay, so now that that's dry, for the next stage we need to go in, and I'm going to apply a watered down black acrylic wash, and then this is going to dirty this piece up and get into all the nooks and crannies, and then we can gently wipe away the excess with a bit of clean kitchen towel, and that will go a long way to show those deep recesses and shadows. Okay, so now that that's all weathered and dark and looks like really old aged copper, for the next stage we're going to go in with yet again more brassy brass, and I'm going to go in with a thick makeup brush, and I'm just going to add a gentle dry brush over the edges, and that'll just go a long way to bring out some of that foreground. And now I'm going to go in with some gold, or glorious gold from Game Colour, and I'm going to do a quick dry brush to add some highlights to the lettering. Okay, so all that's left to do now is to go in with the airbrush and give it a couple of coats of a nice gloss varnish, and I believe that this is all finished. Okay guys, so here it is, all built, all painted and all finished, and I have to admit I do like the finished results. So if you've enjoyed this build, please click that like button and share on Facebook and Twitter, because it helps new people find the YouTube channel more, so I'm always appreciative. Thank you for any help. If you have any comments, comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if you haven't already, please smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future builds. So once again, I'm Francis Gray, and this is the iconic Cyclops from the 7th Voyage of Sinbad. I'll see you in the next build.